All right, guys. So I'm going to split this up into two parts for the remainder. The first part, which is my least favorite part, I'll go ahead and talk, and then after that, we're going to get some stuff where you guys can get ideas going. But anyway, I've been putting this off for a while, and then finally, I just decided not to put it off anymore, and to do it before we all get too far into school, because school started for me this week. So far into school that I don't even want to hear anybody talking in an organized situation anymore. So I figured we'd do this week. A lot of you guys are graduating this year. Hopefully that's not a shock to those of you that are graduating.
Oh yeah, it's happening. Yeah. When did that happen?
It's been happening for 4 years. But inevitably, if your life is anything like mine, this is when you get those old people coming up to you, including your guidance counselors, and they're like, so, what are you going to do with your life?
Yeah.
And you have, really no idea. You're not sure you care. You know what's going on Friday night, and that's about all you need to know, which, by the way, does not change after college, though they'll tell you that it will. And so, yeah, I mean, that's just, that's where you're at, and people are always going to ask you that. And it was interesting as I've been reading up, I mean, for years now, you read the statistics and they don't change, that people get into college and they change their major at least once. Like, that is I think, something in the 90% something or other. I mean, upwards of 90%. People change their major once they get into college. So you go in thinking one thing, and then you start thinking another thing, right? Which is fine, that's been accepted. But then what they don't really publicize is that people are now getting out of college and deciding that the major they got isn't what they actually want to do. And that's okay, that's fine. It happened to me too, and I turned out, only half insane. But I think that underneath all of that is this idea that people start telling you early on, and my buddy and I had a conversation about this years ago, and it's no less true now than it is then, probably more true now, where they tell you, if you remember that scene from Mean Girls, where you got the coach handing out the rubbers, and he's like, the condoms, and he's like, all right, don't have sex, or you'll get AIDS and you'll die. Why'd everybody have a rubber? I feel like what they tell you, really, since the time that you're in grade school, whether implicitly, or whether they let me use different wording, whether they outright explicitly say it to you or not, they tell you that if you don't go to college, you'll be a failure and you'll end up homeless.
And you'll die.
And you'll die, right. And that's basically what they tell you. Now, quick disclaimer, I am not saying that you should not go to college. You can definitely join my trade school that I just started for a low price of, I'm just kidding. But no, I'm not saying that, but they kind of give you one option. And I can't help but think that's why there's a lot of people going into college and figuring, well, no, I'll do this instead because I kind of picked this because I had to, and then they get out and not so much. But I think the question then underneath all of those things, like what am I going to do with my life, why, who's going to lead me in all of this, is who are we in the first place? And I think college does a great job sometimes, if you do it right, of telling you how to go about your career. But there's even more people getting out of college who have no idea who they are as a person. And those people got out of high school, didn't really know who they were, and again, how adults are, it's like, well, you'll figure your life out as you go. I don't know, it's not automatic. Like, it's not like, you don't just figure it out, and I feel like some people I knew did, and some people I knew didn't. If you don't even know who you are, how are you going to figure out what you want to do with your life? Honestly. And I don't know, how good is your life if you don't even know who you are in the first place? So all that to say, obviously that's a big topic, but I just wanted to touch on some basics that I've learned the hard way over the last 10 years, because I had no idea and just went with the flow, like most people I knew when I graduated. And you'll talk to some people, and it worked out great for them, right? I mean, they've got great careers and the whole 9 yards, and I'll still talk to some of them, and they have no idea who they are. Have you guys ever seen The Notebook?
No.
Yes.
What? I can't reference The Notebook.
Have a good cry.
Okay, I'm gonna reference it really quick, and then we're gonna move on. But
I had a bros day.
with the idea of people like doing really well but not knowing who they are. Okay, I'm not gonna ruin the ending for you, right? But she has a summer fling with Ryan Gosling.
She does.
I mean, who didn't, right? I mean, that guy's probably got like 500 of them, right? I think I did, actually. I don't remember the party all that well, but I'm kidding. But anyway, so they have this quick romance. She moves away, right? She starts dating this guy who's wildly successful, but then she meets up with Ryan Gosling again. I'm not going to go into why that happens. You'll see it as you go. And it's my favorite scene in the movie where she's sitting there talking to the guy that she's with that's rich and everything else, and she looks at him and she goes, I never paint anymore. By the way, I've watched this movie 3 times since my last breakup a month ago, so I could quote the movie to you right now. I am that guy, right?
Mitch,
with
no.
ice cream, I did. Alone too.
You don't watch that. You don't watch that. You watch Expendables.
And I listen to Taylor Swift a lot. Yeah.
So what are you
moved on?
guys?
We moved on to Avenged Sevenfold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's the anger stage.
Thank you.
All right. So anyway, she sits there and she goes, "I never paint anymore," and he's looking at her like, I mean, come on. If your fiance walks in the door and she goes, and she looks really troubled and she interrupts you at work, which she never does, and she goes, "I never paint anymore." The look on his face is expected, like, okay, like you're expecting her to be pregnant, or we need to break up, or my mom died in a horrible house fire, but
Specific.
It's
right.
What is
Sorry.
wrong now?
But she goes, "I never paint." But the idea was, it got her thinking, like, I've got all these nice things, I've got you, I'm in a great relationship, got a great career, we got lots of money, but I have no idea who I am, and I don't do these things that make me deeply happy, right? And it's one of my favorite lines in the entire movie. And then the house burns down. I'm just kidding. Anyway, and so there's 2 things that I would bring up then, and then we'll go into the second part where it's less of me talking, which is always my favorite part. But there's 2 things I'd bring up, all under the umbrella of, there was a parable that Jesus told, where it was the parable of the talents. And the talents is what they called their money back then. And so he said, okay, each person gets a talent. One guy gets 5 of them, the other guy gets 4 of them, one guy gets 3, and one guy only gets 1, right? And he says, okay, so the master gives all his wealth to these people. Go and invest it. When I get back, we'll see what you got, right? So they're supposed to make money with it, right? Whether it's, modern day, buy apartment buildings with it, start your own business, buy stuff and then sell it on eBay, like the kind of thing that Shannon does. That, if you didn't know that, she does. Shameless plug again. And so that kind of a deal. But let's see how much money you can make when I get back. I want to see how much you did, and you'll be rewarded according to what you did. So the one guy with 5 goes out and gets, just doubles it. All of them do it, except for the guy with 1. The guy with 1 decides not to do it. So the master comes back, the guy who owns the money, and he's just thrilled to death with everybody else. He says, you did a great job. You did more than what I even expected. Now you're going to have even more. I'm going to give you even more than what you had. Go invest even more, and you get to keep it. Awesome, right? And he goes up to the guy with 1, and you'd think this would be pretty simple. You only got 1. You didn't even have to manage other things. And the guy comes up with, and if you look at theologians, they debate over whether the sun, if the sun has a theological meaning, kind of a thing, like the one that rises. So I read up on what the interpretations were of this, and it was pure crap. But anyway, I think it comes down to 2 things. The guy gives an excuse, basically, and he says, well, I know that you're really strict, and I was really concerned about it, and I didn't want to lose what I had, so I went ahead and buried it in the ground, right? So I couldn't lose it, and you still have your 1. And of course the master gets pissed at him. He's like, that's not what I told you to do. And of course, look at what he's missing out on, right? So why did the guy do that? You can come up with a lot of reasons, and I think there's a lot of reasons, bringing that back around, why we don't use the talents that we have. And one of them is that we were raised to kind of look at this idea that, well, life is all about making, and this is what people will tell you when you're graduating. Just do something that makes you money. A good solid job. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. That's fine. But what about everything else? Well, what is everything else? A lot of these people don't even know what everything else is, right? I mean, she like Rachel McAdams coming in and saying, I don't even paint anymore. There's people who go their entire lives without ever doing something that they like doing. right? Whether or not you're going to make money with it. Other people will tell you, well, if you do like painting, then you should do a career in that, right? And go to Hollywood, and you'll see that that doesn't always work out. Sometimes it does, and sometimes it doesn't.
Most of the time it doesn't.
Most of the time it doesn't. But here's the point. Just because it doesn't make you money, and that the point of the parable is that when you're given something, invest it. It's not specific about how those things were invested, but if you're given something, if you're given a talent, if you're given a skill, you're given your personality, you're given all of these things. God gave these to you, invest them. But we hide them in the ground. For whatever reason, we hide them in the ground. Well, I would love to paint, but it kind of gets in the way of my schoolwork. And if it gets in the way of my schoolwork and I can't have that, job that lets me buy whatever, then it's no good. And we bury it in the ground, or we bury it in our hearts, right? I'm not saying stop doing your schoolwork and give everything up and just start painting. Never said that. Let me be clear. But why aren't you doing it? That's one talent out of how many that you have. Why would you ever bury any of them? Invest them. And that's something that just doesn't get told. I'm not going to sit here and give you a formula and a plan that you can fill out that says, this is how I determine my career. Because this sermon isn't even just about what you're going to do for a career. This sermon's about what you're going to do for your life. And a lot of times, what they'll tell you in college is just get into college, and again, they'll either tell you to follow your dream and don't worry about the money, or really worry about the money. Maybe that puts your dreams at risk, right? But what about everything else that goes with that? All of these talents that you have, all these aspects of your personality that you have. Are you burying those in the ground, or are you actually getting a return on those? Are you using them and getting something back? And that's the question. In biblical times, when all of this was going on, because we tend to put this in a modern context and you lose it, in biblical times, pretty much everybody did a trade. Not really a lot of people grew up thinking, I can't wait to be a carpenter. But you got plenty of carpenters, tent makers, butchers. I mean, that was what you did. I mean, talk about menial work. You didn't get to go out and say, I want to paint for a living. That really did not happen, far less than it does today. I love working with computers. What were computers? I mean, it just didn't happen like that back then. The context of this is that you weren't going to make a career doing the things that you wanted to do. But you are no less. It doesn't mean that you have less talents. They didn't have less talents back then. And we don't have less talents today. You're still supposed to, your personality and all these things that you love doing, art, driving, whatever it may be, do those things. You are given those. Invest those things. And often we're told not to do that. And that, I think, is one of the greatest tragedies of any society, whether it's back then or whether it's now. And nobody tells you that. Nobody tells you that stuff. I can't give you a formula again to plug in and say this is going to be your career. I can't say that. But
I wish make everything a lot easier.
It would. But what about your talents? So that's point number one. Is make sure no matter what you do, don't neglect those things. And why? Your heart, as corny as this is going to sound, your heart really comes alive when you do. And Shannon's going to share on that one in a second. But as corny as it sounds, your heart really does come alive. And I'll give a personal example, then we'll go to Shannon. When I was in college, I did that whole thing of just do what you got to do, get through, get the job that pays the bills, then I'll go and have fun and do the things that I like to do. I'm busier now than I ever was then. And yet, in the last 6 months, I've built my own guitar, which I just finished. I've played a lot more music than I used to. Thank you. That's my new girlfriend. That's who watched The Notebook with, man. Just set right up there on the thing. Are you crying too? Teardrops on my guitar, right? So much Taylor Swift over
That was
last
good.
month.
That was good.
You really should
Thank
put
you.
a sample in
Yeah,
it
I like
if she's
that.
your girlfriend.
There it is. There it is.
And that's where I come from.
So what was I? Oh yeah. So I've played music more than I ever have in the last few years. I've hung out with friends more than I ever have in the last few years. All of these things that I wake up now in the mornings and my life is far more content, far more worth living than it ever was before. Now, is my time to do those things limited? Sure, but I still put them in there. And I enjoy my life so much more than I ever did before. I mean, I cannot even tell you, and until you've lived it, until you've experienced, you just don't know. But life is far better because I have all of these talents and I have all of these passions, and I'm finally, in the last few years, doing those things, along with these other things. And you had a point you're gonna make too.
I did 3 hours ago.
We were talking in line over there, and she came up with this.
I had a grocery store revelation, and it was wonderful, and everyone experienced it too. Everyone got goosebumps and chills. But that was, I have a short attention span, so I'm just going to wing this, everyone. So prepare your mind holes. I used to bury my talents when I was younger. Like, I always knew that I had like a passion for singing and acting and stuff like that, and all the arts, but I would be so shy. People would be like, "Oh, will you sing for me right now?" I would always just be like, "No, never mind. I don't sing. I don't do that." But you know, now that there's a lot of things that I don't like. School, socializing, being polite. I don't like those things.
Okay, no one, we noticed.
Yeah. But even though you have like a lot of stress on you and a lot of pressure, especially to go to college, because that's what's viewed by adults as like what you should be doing. The second that I get home and that I can, you know, write my own songs or play my own songs or just play anyone's songs, my heart just comes alive. Like, it's like once you find that thing, don't ever try and bury it. Like, once you have that, never let it go, and just always cherish it and remember it and keep it going throughout your life, your entire life.
Awesome. Thank you. As Rachel McAdams teaches us in the Notebook, keep painting.
Praise Rachel McAdams.
Oh, she's sick. Okay, anyway, so that would be the first point, is no matter what you do, no matter what you choose, use your talents, and you'll get better at them, and they will be more rewarding for you, right? They keep multiplying, you get more and more. So that's part one. Part two, my final point on it, would actually be a little gem to help you out as you go and you pick your career. And so here it is. My buddy, and this is something that God has taught me, as well as a buddy of mine and I were having a conversation about 6 months ago about it. He's the guy that I told you about who's an undertaker, a mortician. Yeah. So,
And he loves his life.
well, yeah. So for those of you who don't know the story, quick backstory. He had about 120 units. I mean, enough to graduate college, but it was all of the lower level stuff. So he goes to do the upper level stuff. He moves to North Carolina. He finally gets into his first set of group projects. He was going to be a mechanical engineer. Now this guy is incredible with machines. He's fixed up at least 2 cars. He was doing work at a body shop. They loved him. The guy's great. And that's what he wanted to do for a living. He knew this. He'd been doing this since he was a kid. So he gets into his program, finally gets into the upper level stuff. He does his first set of projects. Now his dad is one of the huge was one of the huge higher ups at JPL. Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena. They do the Mars rover and stuff like that. This guy was up there. So he's an engineer. His brother is an engineer, right? And so Adam was going to be an engineer, and he loves it. So he calls his brother one day, and after this first round of group projects, and he goes, "Craig, are all mechanical engineering majors this dry?" And Craig goes, "What do you mean?" He says, and Adam's got a crazy sense of humor. All right, this is the guy who put pictures of on Facebook of his hedgehog, and yeah, he has a hedgehog. So that sets it up right there. Of his hedgehog and swimming in a bowl, and he's wanted 2 things: floaties and the address for the IOC, the Olympic Committee, because Patricia, he named her Patricia, wants to compete this year. It was the Olympic year. This is the kind of guy he is, right?
I want to see that.
Oh, he's hilarious.
Did you still have a picture?
What's up?
Can you
Oh, it's
show
online.
us-
I can show you guys. Yeah.
Show us that picture.
So anyway, this is the kind of guy he is. He calls up Craig, his brother, and he goes, "Are all mechanical engineers this dry?" Craig's like, What do you think I am? And Adam's like, no, man, we have great times, and da-da-da-da. He's like, yeah, but nobody else ever really does. He's like, if that was a problem, I could have told you about that long ago. He's like, I mean, I make jokes, and nobody gets it. He said, I cannot deal with these people for the next 2 years. And Craig goes, well, those are the people that you're going to be around for the rest of your life if you become a mechanical engineer. Adam goes, huh, okay, good to know. Hangs up the phone. So he's thinking about it for a few days. He's like, I just don't think that I can do this. He starts thinking, well, what else would I do? I've already put all this money, all this time into it and everything else. And he remembered when our best friend Dean had died, that his mom kept telling us how thankful she was for two things. Number one, for the way that we stepped up, and also for how much the funeral home had helped. And
Is that the guy on the surfboard?
yes, yeah. His name's on the surfboard. He's not on the surfboard. Let's make that, yeah, clear. That's surf wax, not ashes. Anyway, so,
That's Sue.
sorry. He's my best friend. He would appreciate that joke, so we're good. Anyway, so he thinks about it and he goes, I would really like to use my skills to make people's lives better and to deal with people with a sense of humor like mine. I think I want to be a mortician, an undertaker. He goes and he interviews for it before he's even dropped out of school because he reads that the application deadline is done in 2 days. So he drives 6 hours to where the site's going to be, all the way across North Carolina, goes in there, and the guy asks him, how long have you thought about this? He goes, few days. And the guy looks at him like, you can't be serious. And he tells him the entire story. And he goes, that's why I think I would like this. He goes, all right, I'm going to give you a few extra weeks extension on this. Why don't you go do some tours, talk to some people, see if you like it. We'll go from there. So he does. He goes in there. He starts joking around with people. Finds that they're even more twisted than he is. I mean, like, he loves the sense of humor that goes on in there. I mean, and so he ends up loving it. He applies, he gets in, and he loves it. That's what he does now, and he absolutely loves it. Okay, I gotta tell that joke. This will give you an idea of what this guy's like. So he's driving the hearse, which, by the way, those things have crazy engines in them. They're Cadillacs, and they have great engines in them. So he's driving the hearse. You good one?
Woods, calm down.
So he's driving the hearse, and he's going way too fast, right? He's in great suspension, great power. The highway patrol pulls him over. And the highway patrolman comes up, and this guy's serious as a heart attack, right? And goes, you know why I pulled you over? He's like, yeah, probably because I was speeding. And he's trying to look nervous and everything, which he was a little bit nervous. And the guy goes, yeah, why were you going so fast? And my buddy, who you can see the casket in the back, just straight face, looks at him and goes, I heard breathing. It wasn't mine. Guy didn't even get it. Didn't even get it. Of course, he goes back to the funeral home, and they're just dying. So that's the
You're welcome, Gary.
He sits. What?
You're like, a person goes to the funeral home and they're just dying. And then I'm going,
sorry. Yeah, that's I am by far
That was good. Yeah, I'm for the win.
Very good.
Anyway, so all that to be said, this is Adam.
What? And he hasn't seen me.
This is the path that he took, and he decided not to go the college route, right? You go to trade school for that kind of a thing. And he was happier than he was in college. And we were having this conversation when he was out here a few months ago. And I said, do you ever regret it?
Yes.
And he goes, no, and I don't think that college was something that I needed to do. He's like, I actually wasted that time. I said, well, what made you decide to make that jump? Because he and I were raised by the same kind of parents, like go to college and that's what you do. And he said, this is what my dad told me right before I made that switch. He goes, figure out who you are, figure out what you like to do, and then just go do it. And don't give up until you get there, and throw everything you've got, 120%, into getting that. He's like, whatever you end up picking. He goes, can you do this? Sure. Do you want to do it? I don't know. He goes, but you know what? If it matches up with what you like to do and who you are, good, do it. But just whatever you choose to do it now, start on it, and don't give up and follow it through. And he goes, all 3 lined up for me, and there we go. Not all of you will maybe get to do, it won't necessarily be your dream job, right? But as we just talked about, you can still do those things you like to do along with what you do to make money. That's the beauty of this whole thing. It's like we've been taught in this Western society that you do what you like to do to make money. I'm sorry, that doesn't happen in the rest of the world, and a lot of times it doesn't even happen here. But whatever you choose to do it. Follow through with it. Make it work for you. If all 3 of those things line up, then that's great. But if they don't, you can still do those things. Like, those are your talents. Make them work for you. If you like building stuff, like, I'm not going to be a guitar maker for a career. I'm not even going to make money off of it. But I can still do it on the side, and I love doing it. And like Shannon and I were talking about, that's what brings your heart to life, right? But pick something career-wise. Feel some things out. Experiment with it. That's why I told his story. Like, you get a little ways down the road, you decide, maybe I don't like it. Hopefully you don't have to get too far. Like, experiment before you get there. And then once you pick something, go with it. See it through. And still be using your talents while you do that. Shannon.
Okay, so what you're saying is, I can still do music, but also at the same time work at the El Pollo Loco serving churros to angry white people?
2 things. Technically, yes. Recommended, no. Here's my question for you. We've been talking about movies. We've cited a lot of movies in this. Let's say that they decided to make a movie about you before you died.
Oh wow, that's a
Right.
boring movie.
I'm not even saying it would be a Hollywood blockbuster, right?
No, just a movie.
Just a movie.
That exists.
Yeah. What your movie, what would be in your movie? So, for example,
Tom Hanks.
what would the plot line be? If you're like a superhero, what would and you can go with stuff like that. Like, it doesn't have to be real life. I always like to tell the story that when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be Batman. Right? I was going to be Batman. I was going to take over for Bruce Wayne. He didn't know it, but I was going to. So that's fine. I would go with that and say, I'm going to be Bruce Wayne. Here's what the bat suit's going to look like. Here's what I'm going to do with it.
You should be in the next movie.
You know, that whole thing. Yeah, go with that kind of thing. Like, maybe it's a romance. Maybe it's something like The Notebook, right? Maybe it's a superhero movie. Maybe it's a music movie, right? You're the next, big Rolling Stones. So think about it. Again, I would prefer you did this individually, so it's going to get awkward and quiet in here. But think about it for the next few minutes. If somebody wrote a movie about your life, and they were looking back, and again, it could be fictional, what would it say? And I'll explain why we're doing this right before we go. But go.
You're making a movie. You're making a movie of us?
No, I won't. But anyway, so I would suggest spread out to different corners of the room.
He hasn't seen her.
Spread out downstairs. So the reason why I asked is because a lot of times it's easier to make up a story than it is to actually plan out real life. But these stories will actually reveal most of the time, like, the desires of your heart. For example, when I said I wanted to be Batman, what did I always like about Batman? I liked the fact that, first of all, Batman was the one that didn't need superpowers to do what he did. He could train to do it. He was real, and he helped people. He didn't kill anybody, right? But he was locking up the bad guys and saving the good guys. And that says something about my heart. And he got Catwoman. Meow.
Anne Hathaway, man.
No, not Anne
And I love a girl and leather. That has not changed. Yeah. But that says something about your heart. I do like women in leather. That's true. That says something. But I want to
everyone.
youth bastard. Yeah. didn't make the Perry's mom joke that I thought of.
Ew.
So,
Well, now you have
anyway, yeah, it's close. It's happening. But the idea that also says about my heart is that I want to help people. Like, in a general sense, I want to help people. I want to be there for people, and I want to do it in a way that I realistically could do it. I always was thinking, like, I could actually maybe do this. And as a kid, I didn't necessarily think, like, I didn't dissect why that was such a big thing for me, but it was a big thing for me. And then you get older, and people tell you, well, just, you know, don't think about that stuff anymore. But it says something about your heart. And I would encourage you guys to go home, and as you start planning out in college, and they give you all these sheets to plan out, try that scenario. If somebody made a movie about my life, what would the romance story or the rom-com look like? That tells you something about yourself. It tells you something about who you're looking for. It tells you something about what you want in your life. If you're the superhero, it tells you at its core something about who you are. That's what's in your heart, and those are your talents. How are you going to use those? And that's why I asked you guys to imagine it. Think about it. That's all I got for you. That's it.